and welcome to Bitches of Horror. And today we have Mr. Jack Shoulder with us, who has done films such as Nightmare on Elm Street 2, The Hidden, Alone in the Dark, Arachnid, Wishmaster 2, Renegades, so much. And really honored to have you on our show.
Happy to be here.
So we'll start off with that you've made so many films in the horror and sci-fi genre, and we were wondering if this is a favorite genre to watch as well, or if you have another.
Not really.
No?
I've never been a big fan of horror. I never thought I would be making horror films, but that I was living in New York. I was working as a film editor. I was making some short films, and I had an opportunity to make my first feature in the genre, so I took it. So basically, Alone in the Dark was my first feature, and so I really wanted to make an art film, so I decided to make an art film disguised as a horror film.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what I did, and then after that, New Line, the company that I did, which was my first film, their first film actually. They'd been a film distribution company, and then they did Elm Street, and Elm Street made a lot of money, and then did Elm Street 2, and Wes Craven was going to direct it, but he never really liked the project. He didn't write it; someone else wrote it, and so he quit 6 weeks before they were going to start shooting, and they asked me to do it, and my first reaction was no, and then somebody told me, "Don't be an idiot. It's going to make a lot of money, and you'll have a career directing films." And so I said yes, and it made a lot of money, and I had a career directing films. So it worked out pretty well.
Yeah. So you don't regret it?
No, and I mean, in a sense, I'm actually, horror suits me, or because it's transgressive, and I'm sort of a transgressive person. I don't like to follow the rules. I have a slightly odd sense of humor, so it all kind of fits in.
Yeah.
Every movie I've made it has some humor. Even the serious films I've made have some humor in them. So I have a slightly skewed way of seeing the world. So it kind of fits. And I love a good horror film. Most of them are not good. Well, most of all films are not good.
Yeah, that's true.
So, so there's maybe 5% or 10% of everything that's good. So if it's a good film, then I like it.
Yeah. Absolutely. So talking about Freddy and you taking over from Wes Craven, what was that like taking over? For Wes Craven, did you feel any pressure or
no? Well, I felt an enormous amount of pressure because I had 6 weeks to make a movie that I had no idea how to make. They had already started the production process, and so I was living in New York. They flew me out to Hollywood. There's a production office. They hand me a sheet of paper that's has like 100 special effects, none of which I had the slightest idea how to do.
Yeah.
And I had all these locations. I had to and so basically I had an anxiety attack that lasted for about 6 weeks.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was pretty scary. Back then, the idea of a sequel is not like now, where you make a film and then it makes money, and then you make a second one and it's bigger and it makes more money. At that time, in 1980, 81, the idea of a sequel was, can we just squeeze a little more money out from this? And it's not going to be that good, and it's going to be made for less money. And that was kind of the idea. I mean, in this case, the budget was, I think, either the same or bigger than the first budget, basically because Wes was going to do it. But their expectation was, we just need to make a film that says Nightmare on Elm Street in the title, and that has the character of Freddy in it, and that he comes out when people are dreaming. And that was all that they really cared about. They did not want to bring back Robert. Well, they wanted to bring back Robert, but his agent had the nerve to ask for more money. And they said, we're not going to pay you more money. You're taking advantage of us. And so they said, well, we can get somebody else to play him. And I said, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And and they said, well, we're not paying him. His agent is trying to take advantage of us, and we don't like that. So I said, well, I think he's really important. And the interesting thing is that they said that they were going to get somebody else, but they never. I did all the casting. They hadn't cast anybody, and we never had auditions for anybody for Freddy. So I think in the back of their mind that it was just like, well, we're going to hold out to the last minute, and basically 2 weeks before we were going to start shooting, they made the deal with him. But he had already booked another film to do, so he wasn't available until week 2 of our shoot. So the first week, there's a scene in the shower, and there's one shot where Freddy walks out of the shower, and that was just an extra. It was just a guy. People say, "Oh, he was a stuntman." He wasn't even a stuntman. He was just an extra. He was just a guy who was the same size as the Freddy outfit.
Yeah.
So he got to be, one of the most iconic characters in horror films for about 10 seconds.
I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
To have that opportunity.
Yeah. But I mean, basically, the only thing that they told me was make it scary and keep Freddy dark. We don't want to ever see his face lit up. And that was it, So there wasn't a lot of pressure from them. I mean, there's just a lot of pressure because it was a difficult film. Also you shoot, with horror films, you end up shooting a lot at night, so you get really tired, but other than that, it was interesting because as soon as we started shooting, all my anxiety completely went away.
I mean, it's
kind of like stage fright, the actor.
Yeah.
You have to push the actor onto the stage. And
kind of with I'm also organizing this festival, so like before it's like, oh my god, and then when the festival actually starts, like, okay, let's just go, let's do this.
Right.
So yeah, I think that I can relate to that. Have you watched all the Elm Street films?
I have.
Yeah. Which is your favorite, except for Freddy's Revenge?
Well, honestly, if you ask me objectively, which are the best ones, probably my favorite is either 3 or Wes's New Nightmare. I mean, part of the reason I wasn't intimidated by doing Elm Street 2 was I never thought Elm Street 1 was that good of a movie. I thought it had a great concept, and the idea to cast a really great actor as Freddy and give him a character, because usually, like in Friday the 13th or he was just a guy that jumped up and killed people and then went away.
Yeah.
Whereas with Freddy, you actually had a character, but I thought the actual filmmaking itself was just not that good. I mean, I thought Wes's New Nightmare, that he really had grown, he'd become a much better director. And 2, for a long time, 2 was like the unwanted orphan, because it was different. If you look at the poster for 2, there's no Freddy. The original poster, there was no Freddy on the poster. They didn't know that it was all about Freddy. Then as soon as that happened, you look at the DVD, he's on the cover, starring Robert Englund. If you look at the original poster, it says starring Mark Patton. So, and what's happened now is that the film is getting a lot of recognition for a lot of different reasons. But I did an interview with actually sort of your American equivalent. There are a couple of ladies who have a nightmare podcast.
Yeah.
And one of them, and this was a couple of years ago, said, well, it's wrong to criticize the film and say the problem with the film is it's not like 1, because you just have to look at it as a different film.
Yeah.
It has a different
True.
Then with 3, they went back to the original formula, except Freddy was now, funny. He was now a comedian as well as so. But I thought 3 was very entertaining. I thought 4 was kind of like 3, but kind of on steroids. And then 5 I thought was very unengaging, and 6 was just not that interesting.
Yeah, 6 was, yes, special. So moving on from Nightmare on Elm Street, we also know you directed an episode of Tales from the Crypt.
Yes.
What were some of the unique challenges for shooting on a cable series with limited runtime versus a feature film?
Well, shooting TV, normally you have much less time. I mean, with a feature, with Elm Street, we had maybe 35 days to shoot, a movie that ended up at 100 minutes. With a TV show, you have 7 days, if you're lucky, 8 days to shoot. Well, 60 minutes of television, which is probably about 49 minutes. So you have to shoot a lot faster and do a lot more. The Tales from the Crypt, however, because it was HBO, I had a whole week to shoot just a half hour, which was probably about 24 minutes. So I had a pretty good schedule. The original script was not very good. So when they hired me, they said, well, the original script is not very good. So we've hired Don Mancini, from Chucky, to do a rewrite. At that point, he was just a young writer. I mean, he had already done, I think he'd already done Child's Play, but he was still kind of a young writer. And they were hiring a lot of, well-known people for the show. And so it took place in a funeral parlor. And I thought, well, in African-American neighborhoods, the funeral parlor, the guy who's the funeral director is a very important person in the community. And I thought, what if we just shoot the whole thing with an all-black cast? And they said, oh, okay. And so that's what we did. It was the most fun I think I've ever had, because the script was kind of pretty funny and macabre.
Yeah.
And everybody was having a good time, and a lot of the actors were already friends. They knew everybody, so there was just a really good feeling.
Yeah.
And HBO, never, they basically just completely left me alone. They just said, okay, you have 7 days, just get it done in 7 days. And most people, a lot of the other people who shot, who are all moderately well known or quite well known directors. I think Bob Zemeckis did one, and about half of them took an 8th day. So the fact that I could get it done in 7, I was doing very well. So they just left me alone. And even when I normally you then cut the film together and then you show it to them and then they have a whole bunch of notes. Well, I showed it to them. They said, okay.
That's great.
Which had never happened before. It freaked me out so much that I went back and changed a few things that I probably shouldn't have changed. So.
That's cool, though. Well, you worked with so many big names.
And also, by the way, the wraparounds with the Crypt Keeper, that was done by a completely separate group.
Okay.
So anybody's interested.
You worked with so many big names in the acting industry. Who was your absolute favorite working with?
Well, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, there were people who were like the best actors. There were people who were just the nicest people to work with. Kyle MacLachlan was a really nice guy and a fantastic actor. I mean, he's just great in The Hidden. I worked with Jack Palance, was really fantastic. He was a tough guy, and it was my first film. There are a lot of actors, and they act like they're really nice people, and they're assholes. So he kind of acted like he was an asshole, but he was actually a nice guy. Yeah. And I really learned a lot from him. In a way, I mean, he never said, "Hey Jack, here's what you should," but just the way he would do things. I mean, we were like we were rushing and rushing. We were always, we never had enough time, and we're rushing, and we're like stick him in front of the camera, and we're ready. Okay, and he said, I remember when I was working on a film that was directed by George, and he just kind of everybody had to just stop and wait, and he told this story, and he said, and George Stevens, he had this little box next to him, and when we were getting ready to do a shot, he would have everybody get quiet, and he would just turn the knob, and music would come up. that felt like the right music for the scene. And then he'd just let the music play, and then he'd turn the music down, and he'd say, okay, action. So he was kind of giving me a lesson without giving me a lesson.
Oh, yeah, that's cool.
Donald Pleasance was fantastic. James Earl Jones. I did 3 movies with Martin Landau. He was a great actor, but he was also he sort of became a mentor to me. So he helped me a lot with working with actors. He was a real expert on that.
Cool. So we want to kind of round off. We have 3 questions from some of our viewers.
Okay.
First, we have a question from Don Anelli, who was actually, I think I already asked a question about Wes Craven, but was there anything that was imposed on the studio to include in the film, or were you allowed to put any individual touches on the script since you came in so?
Well, normally the first thing that I do is I work on the script. So even though there's a script, everybody always thinks the script could use more work. So when I come in, I look at the script and I try to decide what's this movie about, and then I look at the script and I say, okay, this doesn't work. This needs to be reworked, and maybe we need to change this or that. So for instance, The Hidden had a fantastic script, but the one thing I felt was missing was that the characterization of the Michael Nouri, the cop from L.A., needed to just have more character, because ultimately Kyle's character is going to want to take him over. So there has to be something. So I thought, how can I show a good relationship with his wife? Because the way the scenes were written, they were good, but they were kind of very lightweight. And so I got this idea, well, let's give them a child. Because then you can see, the way you love a child is very evident. And so I put that into the script.
Yeah.
Pretty much I've been left alone. I mean, the main thing is just shoot it on the schedule and the budget. That's really been, otherwise they just leave me alone. So I guess I've been lucky.
Next we have from...
I mean, sometimes they'll come on the set and they'll just stand there and stare at you when they think you're behind, which, is supposed to make you work faster.
But you just...
I've had some of the best moments of my life on a film set, and also some of the worst, so it goes both ways.
Yeah, I can imagine. Next we have a question from Patrick Leo Brander. He says, first of all, thanks for making The Hidden. It might not be the most well-known, but it's one of the greats among sci-fi horror thrillers. What would your initial reaction be to a remake of The Hidden? Do you think anything fresh or new can be brought, and if so, what personally would you like to see?
Well, I definitely think, there was a sequel.
He said, P.S., let's pretend the sequel never happened.
Yeah. Some friends of mine actually made the sequel, and I read the script, and I've never seen it, and I just don't particularly want to see it. It's definitely something that you could do a sequel to. I mean, we actually tried to set it up as a TV series, because it's the kind of with it going into body after body, it works very well. So I think you could definitely do a sequel. I don't know a remake. I think you could do, if there was Terminator, then there was Terminator 2 that takes the story to the next step. So I definitely think there could be a sequel. If you're going to do a sequel, you should do something good, but it's very, very much a kind of film that you can do a sequel to.
Yeah. Great. And our last question from a special name here, Screwhead Maggot. Did Freddy ever visit you in your sleep?
No. Well, I've had plenty of nightmares, and I've had nightmares about making movies. I have a recurring nightmare where I'm on a film set, and either I haven't read the script and I don't know what the movie's all about, and everybody's saying, okay, what do we do now? Very often I'm in my pajamas and I'm in my underwear. I don't have any pants on, and I'm just trying to pretend like so no one will notice that I don't have any pants on. And I actually told it to a friend of mine, and he said, "Oh, I have the same dream all the time."
So it's a common filmmaker.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's like the actor's nightmare.
Yeah.
The actor goes on stage and they don't know what play it is. They don't know their lines. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Oh,
and
pleasure.
we look forward to seeing your panel on Sunday.
Oh yeah. That should be very interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
There's a lot of very interesting stuff with Elm Street too,
Yeah.
and I think we're going to have a really interesting discussion. So I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but if it comes out before Sunday, the 20th, please come.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Stay horrific. Bye.